in their statement. The NDC claimed that they adopted policies during their time and programs to ensure the nation consistently increased its share in most petroleum agreements that were negotiated and signed by them, and that Ghana's share in the 3 oil-producing fields kept increasing from 13.6% to 20%. And they mentioned the Jubilee field, 13.6%, the 10 field, 15%, and then the Sankofa Dinyami field, 20%. They added that this incremental sequence in the growth of Ghana's share under the NDC government, and I repeat, they added that this incremental sequence in the growth of Ghana's share under the NDC government clearly demonstrates a conscious and consistent effort to increase Ghana's stake in petroleum agreements. Unfortunately for them, they cannot claim credit for the growth in government take in these very petroleum agreements they have cited. Because these petroleum agreements were all negotiated and signed by the before government. And so how can they be demonstrating NDC's conscious effort at increasing Ghana's stake? They were negotiated and signed by the before government. The Jubilee contract, the 10 contract, and then the Sankofa Dinyami contract. In fact, all the producing fields in Ghana today are coming from contracts that were signed by the before government. Not a single petroleum agreement signed by the NDC is producing oil today. Never. And so how can they misinform Ghanaians when Ghanaians fully know that these fields that are producing oil are coming from efforts which were made by the before government that negotiated these contracts and signed these contracts and approved by Parliament? They also put out that all the 13 petroleum agreements that came to force under the NDC government have enhanced fiscal terms and increased the national stake. Of course, they signed some 13 petroleum agreements when they were in government, and that, I think, is what they are now referring to. But if those petroleum agreements did not have enhanced fiscal terms, that would have been a crime to our country, because they were all signed after several discoveries of crude oil, an indication that our business had been relatively de-risked. And so if you have fiscal terms when we did not make discovery of oil being the same as physical terms at the time we are producing oil, that will be a crime. And so for us, it will have been problematic if the agreement they signed did not have enhanced terms. But in spite of this, the NDC failed to understand conditions of the market at the time they signed these agreements. And therefore, the increased fiscal terms achieved in the petroleum agreements they signed have taken us nowhere for most of them. The 13 agreements signed by the NDC were signed between 2013 and 2016. Out of these 13 agreements, the only companies that have met their minimum obligations are ENI and Springfield, out of the 13. AGM had to change its ownership because a new owner acquired AGM and invested in the block of AGM before they were able to meet their minimum obligations. The remaining 10 companies were expected to drill 11 wells. They have not drilled a single well since they were awarded the contracts in 2013, 2014, and 2015. They were expected to spend $700 million. They spent only $30 million. These are the contracts with the so-called enhanced fiscal terms. We have always said that 0% of 100 is 0. And therefore, if you have even the highest fiscal terms in a petroleum agreement, that will not lead to production, it amounts to nothing. The NDC is well aware of this, but anytime you raise these issues about the fact that they gave contracts to companies that do not have track record, that do not have the financial wherewithal, that do not have the technical capacity, and therefore the enhanced terms they are talking about is nothing if you do not have companies that can drill and find oil. Then they rise to defend themselves. Unfortunately, their defense is also weak. The defense they often resort to is that the companies did not meet their minimum obligations because of ITLOS. The judgment, the provisional judgment by ITLOS that froze oil activity during that provisional period. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is that of all the agreements they signed, the 13, only 3 agreements were affected by the ITLOS judgment. The AGM, Amin International, and Amin. Those were the 3 that were affected by the ITLOS judgment of all the 13 contracts they signed. But today, if you put it to them that they gave Ghana a raw deal, then they said, oh, the companies were not able to fulfill their obligations because the ITLOS judgment stopped them from work. As if all the 13 contracts were affected by the ITLOS judgment. In fact, even one of the agreements affected by ITLOS, the AGM, has recently announced discovery of oil. In 2019, they announced discovery of oil and gas. This tells you that ITLOS was not an issue if the companies were committed to meeting their obligation, because one of them affected by ITLOS continued to meet its obligations and actually made discovery of oil in 2019. And so what happened to the others? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we must understand that fiscal terms alone do not define the success of government negotiations of oil contracts. The experience and financial capacity of the companies you negotiate with are equally important. After all, the objective of every government is to negotiate a contract that can result in oil production. A fiscal strategy should therefore inspire increase oil reserves and increase oil production. But as you know, the NDC's negotiated fiscal terms, however enhanced they were, have not achieved these objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, the NDC claimed that they took a bold step in establishing the Public Interest and Accountability Committee as an independent statutory body mandated to promote transparency and accountability in the management of petroleum resources in Ghana. Yes, they created PIAC, as we call it, in short, but they created a weak PIAC. As a committee, they did not have teeth to bite. as they were merely required to produce semi-annual reports and annual reports, whose adverse findings cannot be enforced. PR cannot summon officials, PR cannot prosecute. That is the PR they are claiming credit for. The NPP government is currently holding consultations with stakeholders on a new bill, the Draft Natural Resource Governance Bill, which is going to empower PIAC to enforce its findings. I also want to assure you that the NPP government has demonstrated enough commitment to transparency and accountability in Ghana's oil and gas sector. The government passed the General Petroleum Regulations, which provided significant transparency reforms, including, for example, a requirement to disclose beneficial ownership information in petroleum agreements, a requirement to disclose marketing agreements signed by GMPC, and a requirement to disclose corporate social responsibility projects undertaken by GMPC. This is demonstration of our commitment to transparency. The Petroleum Exploration and Production Act provided for the establishment of a register of petroleum agreements and the application of open and competitive bidding of oil blocks. Very good transparency provisions. Unfortunately for the NDC, they did not establish the register. They did not also apply open and competitive bidding for oil blocks, even though they awarded oil blocks in 2016. It took the NPP government to establish the register of petroleum agreements and publish all the petroleum agreements signed by government. Again, it took the NPP government to apply the open bidding principles to the conduct of Ghana's first bidding rounds for the allocation of oil blocks. Sorry. They claim that they repositioned Boss and Tor to become strong companies, only for the NPP government to weaken them, and that they secured 2 million barrels of Ghana's crude oil from the 10 fields to be processed by Tor. I'm happy they said to be processed by Tor. And this is the reason. They almost collapsed Boss and Tor. And many of you who watched the performance of Boss and Tor will attest to this. Contrary to the NDC's claim that Boss was making profits during their time, the facts do not support this. Boss in January 2017, when the NDC handed over power, owed $624 million United States dollars to suppliers, BDCs, and related parties in respect of crude oil imports for processing at Tor and refined products which got lost from Boss tax. But as of February 2020, this year, the outstanding amount to settle to clear the books of Boss now stands at $57 million. Right from $624 million, Boss under the NDP has settled this outstanding amount except $57 million, which is left. An audit on Boss accounts also shows that between the periods 2013 and 2016, there was a significant rise in the net losses by the company, with the highest net loss occurring in 2016 at an amount of 569 million Ghana cedis. The 2018 management account of BOST showed a 70% reduction in losses. 2018 management account, again telling you that under the NDC government, BOST had done so well to reduce the losses inherited from the NDC. A 70% reduction in losses from the previous year. Similarly, the 2019 management account indicated a further 41% reduction in the net losses over the previous year. This steady decline in the loss levels of the company from 2017 to 2019 shows that during the year 2020, the company will likely make a profit. And we are very confident that BOST is turning from a loss-making company to a profit-making company. There is no doubt, therefore, that BOST under the MPP is in a better position. BOST continues to pursue its objectives, including holding strategic reserves of petroleum products. Other private depots also hold sufficient stocks, which together with BOST provide enough buffer for petroleum product supply. We want to assure the people of Ghana that unlike the NDC's time, when we had long queues at petrol stations, for 3 days in June 2014, due to fuel shortage, I hope we remember those days, the Akufo-Addo government would never expose Ghanaians to such crisis. The following shows our reserve positions if you want to know. For petrol, because they were claiming that we don't have strategic reserves. For petrol, we have 3.5 weeks of stock. For diesel, 4.7 weeks. For aviation fuel, 8.7 weeks. On the Tema Oil refinery, the 2 million barrels of crude oil they are supposed to have secured to be processed at all. It's quite interesting because this crude was not refined by the end of 2016 when they left government because TOR was not operational. TOR was not operational. How do you secure crude to be processed by a company that was not operational? That doesn't make sense to me. It took the NPP government to undertake a shutdown maintenance on the TOR facilities, which enabled the facility to refine the 2 million barrels of crude. They accused the government of renegotiating the AGM agreement under bizarre and opaque circumstances. They stated, and I quote, "In the renegotiated agreement, GNPC's additional participating interest was reduced from 15% to 3%. As if that was not enough, Exproco's commercial interest of 24% was dropped to zero." Unquote. As you may know, the AGM petroleum agreement was signed under the NDC government. However, the company could not meet its minimum obligations. Following the acquisition of the company, the new owner presented a request to government for renegotiation to provide some incentives to support the prospects presented by the block that is described in Ghana as the deepest oil block. This is not the first time a government will provide incentives for prospects in deeper blocks to be exploited. Even the UK government has given tax incentives to attract companies to the deeper offshore North Sea area. And so why should it be a crime? This renegotiation is allowed under the law and also under the petroleum agreement itself. Therefore, government granted some incentives, which resulted in the company drilling 2 mandatory wells and an additional well, the third well, which was not in the original agreement. What is the essence of standard petroleum agreements? It's for companies to drill and find oil. And so if I give a company incentives and they are supposed to drill 2 wells and they have done additional well to increase their chances of finding oil, and they have finally found the oil, what it simply means is that the objectives of these incentives have been achieved and Ghana is better off. Ladies and gentlemen, the government also took advantage of the request for renegotiation to evaluate the financial position of GNPC in relation to its ownership interest in the block. Given its many commitments and the need to prevent it from being overexposed, GNPC decided to divest part of its paid interest. And this is not the first time GNPC has not exercised its paid interest. This is not the first time. The Aker block, GNPC said they didn't have money, so they didn't exercise their paid interest. And this is not the first time GNPC declined to buy an interest which was made available on sale by another company. When Talo or Jubilee Partners, I think the EO Group, offered to sell their stake, GNPC had the chance to buy that interest. They said they didn't have money. When Sabre Oil decided to sell its stake, GNPC, they said they didn't have money, and so they didn't buy it. And so Petro South Africa, Petro SA bought it. So this is not the first time GNPC has explained that they don't have money, and so they cannot buy additional interest or exercise their paid interest. And therefore, GNPC decided to divest part of its paid interest. This also means that GNPC is very professional and very strategic, that they do not take on more debts that will further expose them. Curiously, the NDC was economical with the truth by concealing from Ghanaians the fact that the MPP government, as part of the renegotiation, also successfully renegotiated Ghana's free interest from 10% to 15%. Our free interest of 10%, we successfully negotiated that to 15%. And not only this, we successfully negotiated local participation, Ghanaian participation, from 2.5% to 5%. So if you go to the people of Ghana and say, oh, the government reduced Exproco interest to 0, it reduced GNPC's paid interest. And this is not free interest, paid interest. They are supposed to pay for it. The government reduced it from 10% to 3%, without telling Ghanaians that for the free interest, which was 10%, the same government negotiated it to 15%. For local Ghanaian participation, which was 2.5%, the same government negotiated that to 5%. Then you are economical with the truth. You are not being objective to the people of Ghana. This is intellectual dishonesty of the highest form. Negotiation is give and take. And so in our view, we had a net gain. And on top of that, oil was discovered from this field over which we renegotiated the agreement. Compared to the many, many agreements we signed that have taken us nowhere. And so I asked the people of Ghana, if I negotiate a contract which takes me nowhere, it doesn't lead to discovery, it doesn't lead to production of oil, I have enhanced fiscal terms. And I give incentives to a company which leads to a discovery and crude oil production. Which of this should we offer? Should we take? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, The NDC said in their investigations, it's been revealed that a new company by name Port Energy, which was subsequently awarded a 5% free carried interest, was registered a month before the Akufo-Addo-led government triggered the parliamentary processes to amend the petroleum agreement, and that this be the imagination of many well-meaning Ghanaians and experts in the petroleum sector. This is the NDC speaking. But I want the people of Ghana to know that the qualification to be an indigenous Ghanaian company in an oil license is that the company must be incorporated in Ghana and must have 80% of its management and 100% of all other staff being Ghanaians. That's the qualification. Nobody says register the company 10 years before you can participate in oil activity. There is no such provision in any law of our country. Once you are a legal entity incorporated in Ghana, and then you meet the extra, requirement to be called an indigenous Ghanaian company in the language of the oil and gas industry, by having 80% of your management being Ghanaians and then 100% of all other staff being Ghanaians, you qualify. Parliament passed the local content regulations which give out these qualifications. It's not the MPP which did it. Parliament. And this was done during the NDC time. That law was passed during the NDC time. So if you took regulations to Parliament and Parliament passed it, and you feel that you didn't reason well enough at the time you took the regulations to Parliament, come on and say it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the subject of a local company acquiring interest in an oil block is a commercial one. It depends on the commercial partners. That is the international, oil company and the local oil company. They negotiate their commercial terms. It must also be noted that the company they are talking about, COD, is a consortium of old Ghanaian companies. Old Ghanaian companies forming a vehicle to take advantage of an opportunity came together to form COD. It's a consortium. It's not a company owned by one person. A consortium of companies that have existed. Some of them for more than 5 years, some of them for almost 10 years. They came together to form the consortium. And if it has to be one vehicle, it has to be incorporated, it has to be registered. How do you call this new? But that is the NDC's type of argument. That is their type of thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, the NDC claimed that the ACA AGM agreement is the highest level of betrayal by the MPP government, as it clearly smacks of corruption and raises serious transparency and accountability issues because of concessions granted to ACA Energy in the amended agreement. So if you grant concessions to a company, it means that you are corrupt. It means you are not transparent. That is the argument they are putting out. We find it curious why the NDC alleges lack of transparency and corruption in the ACA project. The agreement on the ACA project and the amendments and all the contents were scrutinized and approved by Parliament. And I was on the floor of Parliament debating the NDC. If something is non-transparent, how do you debate it in Parliament? Scrutinized at the committee level and brought to the floor for debate. How can that be non-transparent? How can it be opaque? And the minority bench participated in the debate effectively. And today they say it's marks of lack of transparency. This allegation betrays the NDC's understanding of transparency. The NDC, up to now, has not mentioned any corrupt act involving any official of the government in the ACA contract. Up to now. And we challenge them to do so. But on the incentives provided to ACA Energy, Let's put it in proper context. We should understand that project economics can be enhanced with incentives when market conditions adversely affect the prospects of profitability. This is common economics. And the NDC knows this very well because they have provided incentives before. The decision to incentivize the project was further informed by the imminent threat of declining crude oil production and its potential effect on our economy. For those of you who do not know, we are threatened by the prospects of not being able to increase oil production by 2023. Because our oil production profile shows that the contributions of all the three producing fields will peak and reach plateau levels of approximately 230,000 barrels a day in 2020 this year, and maintain that production level up to 2023, after which production levels will begin to decline if no new fields are brought online. And so we have talked so much about oil industry and the opportunities offered to Ghanaians. By 2023, all the three producers we put together, they will start to decline. And when production is declining, the oil industry is going away. We as a government, we are very responsible. We are not going to sit down and allow Ghana's oil production to go away, or Ghana's oil industry to go away. We are not going to do that. And so if we have to provide incentives to ensure that this project is realized, so that by 2023, we are adding 100,000 barrels of crude oil to what we are already producing. That is what the ACA project is going to bring on board. Another 100,000 barrels of oil added to the 230,000 we would have been producing at the plateau level. That will take us to over 300,000 barrels of oil. That is what a responsible government does, so that we can sustain opportunities. But if we have to discuss incentives given to oil companies, that is not new. The NDC was the first to provide incentives to an oil company in Ghana. You remember the ENI Sankofa project? The ENI Sankofa project. When they were about to do the project, again they said the economics of the project were bad. They needed incentives. And the NDC government provided the incentives through a supplementary agreement and a fiscal support package. And I'm going to tell you some of the incentives they provided. Number one, they provided a debt-to-equity ratio of 2:1 at 7% interest on the commercial loans of the contractor, when the original contract did not have such provisions. But through a supplementary agreement, they granted them a debt-to-equity ratio. What does that mean, a debt-to-equity ratio? What the finance people call tin capitalization. What does that mean? It means that all the capital, the loans you are going to take to undertake the project, if you divide it into 3, put 2 together, the interest rate on which they will take the 2 will not be tax deductible. The 1 is the one that will be tax deductible. That is tax incentive we are giving to them. And so if they go and take a loan at a higher level of interest, and it is not tax deductible, and in some cases they take the loan from their affiliate. The companies take loans from their affiliate, and their affiliate will say the interest is 7%, 10%. And we don't tax that interest expense. It means that that company and its affiliate, they are just getting money and money at the expense of our country. They are ripping us off. They provided that incentive. And the interest rate at which that incentive was provided was 7%. 7% is high. for international commercial loans. Similar international commercial loans are attracting between 3 to 4%. We gave them 7%. Number 2, the gas price for the project was negotiated before the project started. And it was put at $9.8 per million BTU. $9.8 per million BTU. At the time and today is the highest global price for an indigenous gas. In most of the world, indigenous gas delivered in between $5–6 per million BTU. They negotiated a gas price delivered to only Sanzuli. If you add the transportation fee for transporting it from Sanzuli to the Atuabu gas processing plant, then you were talking about $12 per million BTU. Once upon a time, the government negotiated this gas price for Ghana's own gas. Ladies and gentlemen, they did not only negotiate the gas price at $9.8 per million BTU, they provided another incentive that will ensure that that gas price was protected. The $9.8 per million BTU was protected. They provided further incentive. What did they do? They offered, through the supplementary agreement, to make the initial gas price of $9.8 per million BTU viable by providing a fiscal package to the tune of $250 million. Ghana is to pay $250 million in order for the company to achieve a gas price of $9.8 per million BTU. And half of this amount was to be paid by GNPC upfront, and the remaining half spread over the life of the project. The government at that time granted this incentive. It's not done anywhere in the world. They further provided that if GNPC was unable to pay the $125 million, that is the first half, upfront, then ENI and its partners were going to be allowed to overlift crude oil. They have their entitlement, but they were going to be allowed to overlift crude oil, to lift more than what they are entitled to, because GNPC was unable to pay the $125 million upfront. The government was required, under the security package and fiscal support agreement, to issue 5 different sovereign guarantees. Have you heard that before? For one project, 5 different sovereign guarantees, estimated at $1.5 billion United States dollars. If I have $1.5 billion United States dollars, it's the best way to use it to guarantee a project which is going to give us less. But that wasn't all. These 5 guarantees were to be supported by 2 other guarantees provided by the World Bank and the IDA. Another incentive, a government disbursement account to be used for payment for gas supplied to GNPC was to be established. Now, what does that mean? GNPC was required to pay 55%, which they are entitled to from Ghana's oil money, 55% of the carry and participation interest, which by law they are entitled to. They were required to pay all that money, and that's the money they get from oil, that's the share they get. They were to pay it into the government disbursement account, and they could not touch it or use it for any purpose until Sankofa gas was paid for. This, no doubt, was going to grind GNPC to a halt. And finally, another incentive. The gas sales agreement provided for take-or-pay clauses and prioritized Sankofa gas over all other gas. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the Jubilee gas is free for us. President Kufuor negotiated Jubilee gas for us for free. 200 billion cubic feet of gas for free. But the Sankofa contract, which the NDC provided all these incentives to, one of the incentives was that until Sankofa gas is supplied and paid for, Ghana cannot take any other gas, including our free gas. So you have free gas, and then you have to prioritize an expensive gas, 9.8 versus 0, and you have to take the 9.8 until it is exhausted before you can take the free gas. So the implications of these incentives, and I think the NDC has soon forgotten, when they are accusing us of providing incentives to Aker Energy, they have soon forgotten that they were the first to grant incentives that have grave implications for Ghana. And these are some of the implications. The country lost revenue as a result of the exemption of interest expenses from tax deductibility. The negotiated gas price of $9.8 per million BTU ensured that the composite domestic gas in Ghana became $8.8 per million BTU. And that's the interesting part. Because this $8.8 per million BTU resulting from the Sankofa gas, and when I talk about composite gas, you bring all the gas prices together and then you do weighted average. That gives you the composite, gas price for the domestic market. It became $8.8 per million BTU. This was higher than gas imported from Nigeria, which was sold to Ghana at $8.3 per million BTU. Our own gas, we sell it to ourselves at $8.8, compared with Nigeria gas that we import from Nigeria over that long distance of the pipeline, sold at $8.3 to us. Our own gas more expensive than the imported gas. As a result of prioritizing Sankofa gas over Jubilee gas, which I mentioned earlier, President Kufuor negotiated it for free for Ghanaians. And the 10 fuel gas, which is cheaper, we have not been able to maximize the use of our free Jubilee gas, as we are compelled to offtake more Sankofa gas. So the free Jubilee gas, we have to maximize. Currently, we are taking 70 million standard cubic feet of gas from Jubilee, but we take 154 million standard cubic feet of gas from Sankofa. So the free gas, we take 70. The more expensive one, we take 154. That's the injustice. But more curious is this. As a result of less gas taken from Jubilee, oil production from Jubilee fields are declining. I'm sure most of you monitored Talo Oil recently, saying that they were having serious problems because crude oil production was going down in the field. Most of you heard it. And because of this, Talo Oil is going to lay off 25% of its workers, mostly Ghanaians, because oil production in the Jubilee was declining because of high gas oil ratio. So because they are taking less gas from the Jubilee, they are re-injecting more of the gas. And when you re-inject the gas, it gets to the point that the gas content in the oil is higher. And therefore it loses to the oil, it becomes condensate. And that is what we have to do, because the NDC put Sankofa gas over Jubilee. Let me give you some statistics on what this implies for Ghana. Because of the higher gas to oil ratio, we are losing an estimated 15,000 barrels of crude oil a day from the Jubilee field. Because there's more gas than what the field needs. because we are not taking, we have already taken Sankofa. 15,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Multiplied by 365 days, you get 5.4 million barrels a day, a year, assuming no production loss days. 5.4 million barrels. Multiply that by $60, which is the WTI price today, and you get 328.5 million US dollars. That is what Ghana and its partners are losing, because we are re-injecting the Jubilee gas, because we have to take the sample for gas at the expense of Jubilee gas. That's what we are losing. And this is just because of the incentives the NDC provided to the project.
We didn't think about the risk.
And as I said earlier, Talo is further threatening. In fact, they have taken a decision. We have engaged them, and they've reduced it to 25%. They wanted to lay off up to 40% of their staff. Now, the NDC claims success over the 50% domestic requirement for LPG, which is processed by the Atoabo gas processing plant. They said they built it. And because they built it, it is now producing 50% of LPG requirement in the country. That's good news, isn't it? It's good news. But let me ask you, if President Kufuor did not bring a company that would make discovery of the Jubilee field, where would the LPG come from? That's one. Number two, if they did not give incentives to Sankofa over Jubilee, and we were to maximize gas offtake from Jubilee, now you know that we could have even supplied 100% of our LPG requirement in Ghana. Isn't it? So this is good news, but we could have gotten a better news. Ladies and gentlemen, the NPP government has proven to be a better manager of the oil and gas sector. All the mess they created in the gas sector, higher gas price, less gas offtake from Jubilee, and therefore affecting crude oil production from Jubilee, the NPP has reversed the situation. We have renegotiated the domestic gas price from $8.8 per million BTU to $6.08 per million BTU. We have restored the price of Jubilee gas to zero, consistent with what President Kufuor negotiated for us as free gas. Why should it be zero? Because the NDC, even though it was free, they were charging $3 for it. They charge $3 for what is supposed to be free for Ghanaians. And because we are using the gas to produce power, if you charge $3, power tariffs will do what? They will go up. Because we have brought it to zero, we were able to reduce the gas price, and that was why we were able to reduce the power tariffs. 30% for industry, 20% for domestic consumers, 24% or so for commercial consumers. That was the reason. That is a demonstration of good management of the energy sector. And ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that crude oil production does not suffer in the Jubilee, because if you reduce crude oil production, the revenue that comes to the budget, the oil money that comes to the budget is lost. So we have had to take a decision to arrest the decline in crude oil production by negotiating with the partners and ensuring that we now can take 125 million standard cubic feet of gas from Jubilee instead of the 70 million we were taking. That is a responsible government. So the NPP government has recently launched a new strategy for the upstream oil and gas sector, anchored on aggressive exploration and the need to attract companies with track record. This has become necessary because the value of oil may decline in the future because of climate change. And because of this, major financiers of oil-related projects are withdrawing from funding oil projects. International Finance Corporation stopped funding oil projects 3 years ago. The European Fund for Investment this year and last year announced that they will no longer fund oil and gas projects. So funding is going down because the future of oil is uncertain. Because renewable energy is taking over. Now we have electric cars, they don't need oil. So as a government that is forward-looking, what will you do? You need a strategy that incentivizes companies to come and take out the oil as much as we can before the oil becomes useless. That's what a government that is forward-looking will do. And this is why we have provided incentives. But can the NDC also tell us why they provided incentives to Sankofa project? I think I have 2 or 3 papers to conclude.